30 Minutes of Faith, and we're very happy to have Father Michael Kiernan with us from the Sacramento Diocese and other places. Thank you for joining us.
A joy to be with you, John, and looking forward to sharing a little time.
Will you tell us where you were, we know you're Irish, but specifically where you were born and raised in the area?
So you figured out I was Irish,
We figured that out.
Very good. Yes, I was born and raised in a small town, Longford, in Ireland, and I won't say how many years ago that was, but it's a few, and was raised there, and then went off to a city called Waterford to seminary, and spent every summer during my seminary years in Birmingham, England, working on the buildings, construction, to make money to pay for my schooling for the coming year. And then I was ordained priest for service in the Diocese of Sacramento. The system is you go and get trained, and then they work with you from here. Then you come out here. And I came out here in 1973 and was appointed to St. Joseph's Parish in Reading. And
really?
So that's where I started off in the wonderful experience of the Diocese of Sacramento.
Did you arrive there in the summer and it was hot?
I did, and actually the first, I was picked up at the airport by Monsignor Higgins, and he took me out to the bishop's house, and I stayed over there 2 nights, and then headed on to Reading. And a couple of days later, the pastor took me over to Mercy Hospital there, and as you say, very hot. And he met a priest friend of his as we were going into the hospital, and they started talking about everything, and I didn't know anything, and it got hotter and hotter, and I had a heavy black suit that I had brought from Ireland, and I thought I would die, but on the other end, with the Monsignor there, you just don't say anything. And eventually, they even found the heat, and they decided to get into the cool. So that was my experience of Reading.
Is Waterford the Waterford Crystal?
Waterford Crystal, the great Waterford glass factory, was just about a mile or so from where our seminary was, and we would go over there once in a while and see how the glass was made. And all that came back to me when I was in the Holy Land recently, when we went out in Bethlehem, and we saw how glass is made there, about 20 miles from Bethlehem, by our Muslim friends. And so we got a demonstration there also of glass making, and amazing how they can take this piece of clay and turn it into a beautiful cup or whatever the vessel is. So it's beautiful.
How old were you when you decided you wanted to be a priest?
Well, I think it was something that was sort of in my system almost all the time in grade school and then in high school. I went to a school which was sort of had a reputation as being a place that produced priests, a high school. It was a day school, so I never had to go to any place, only a day school. And so I studied there, and I think I studied there, yeah. And so thought about that, and then when at 18 it was time to decide to go on to college or what, and so I made the decision to give it a try, and never had any pressure from my family or anything like that. Sometimes people joke about Irish priests being it's their mothers that have the vocation, not them. But in this case, my father and mother were very happy, and my family, but it was my choice. And then I spent 6 years studying in the seminary, 4 years studying theology, and the first 2 years studying philosophy, and working in tandem with the diocese here. You have to make a decision in the first year what diocese you're going to go to. You could stay in Ireland, go to England or United States, or indeed any part of the world. Some even went to parts of the world which were not English-speaking. But somehow, by God's grace, I choose Sacramento. No particular reason for doing so, but hopefully God was leading me in that direction. And now it won't be long until I'll be 40 years in this ministry in this place. And of course, this is home now, much more so than Ireland.
Well, you've richly blessed Greater Sacramento. Most everybody knows who you are, and that's been a good thing. Are either of your parents still alive?
No, my father lived to a great age of 87, died about 10 years ago. My mother, unfortunately, died a year after I was ordained. She had got serious strokes, and she had gone down fairly fast. So that was a big loss early, and then my father and I. Actually, my father was probably one of my best friends, and when I would go back there to visit we would still do all the things on the farm that we did before, and then my sister lived a little distance from there, and we would have meals with her, and she's actually probably my closest friend is my younger sister, 2 years younger than me, and when I go back there, I stay with her, and I have also a brother and a sister in another part of Ireland, and visit with them, but generally I'm really at home when I'm with my young sister.
Do you resemble your father physically?
Yeah, I think he was extremely good-looking man, yeah.
There you have it. That's all we were looking for. Good answer. Brothers and sisters healthy and everybody doing okay these days?
Yeah. My oldest sister has 5 children, and all of them married now, and then my brother has 3 children, and then my younger sister has 3. And Ireland, of course, is a very changing place today, but all sorts of things going on. But they're hanging in there and seem to be doing fine. And of course, nowadays one can Skype and all sorts of things with email, so a lot of communication back and forth.
Is there a humble pride that they have a brother who's a priest?
Well, there is, but that's a lot less, I would say, than it was in Ireland of 40 years ago. Then it was extremely prestigious. But with all that's gone on in Ireland, and the faith has taken an enormous beating, and huge numbers of people not involved in church and so on. So it's not the position that it was back then. But my sisters and I and my brother and I talk about faith and life, and but it's very different. Just the whole system is different. In fact, my young sister will say to me sometimes, I will say something about this or that, and she will say, "Michael, my dear man, you've been away too long. You don't understand this country anymore. It's not what you grew up with." So the wealth, and now, of course, the challenges that they're facing with the economy and drugs and divorces. I didn't even think about it way back then, but now it's, in fact, I see many single-parent homes and all the challenges that society faces in regard to faith and belief. They face them there, so it's a very different country, and it would be a very difficult place to be in ministry. I find here there's an enormous openness to ministry, and not only in, of course, our Catholic churches, but as you know well, with the interfaith groups and all the different faiths and communities. So I always tell them that what happens in the United States sort of comes to them 5 or 10 years later, and I tell them that there is challenges for sure in the United States with faith and with many things, but that there's an enormously dedicated group of people in all sorts of churches and synagogues and mosques, and that, as Pope Benedict would say, the truth, people will still need that, and they're maybe a little bit newfangled and excited of their prosperity and all the things they've been able to do back there, but in the final analysis, there are no atheists in the trenches, as they say, so they'll come to their a realization of the need for God, I think, again.
Do you get back to Ireland every once in a while?
Well, not as much as I could, I suppose, but actually I'm so at home here, and so many things that I'm involved in, and thank God I'm the type of person that, for me, work is pleasure, and whether it's doing this show or Mass or meetings or the various things that you and I are involved in, it's not a chore, it's a joy, and so I would miss being away from these events if I was gone too long.
How long after you came to Sacramento did you feel that interfaith importance?
Well, I had a few connections. I remember one event where there was this woman of a particular faith who was getting married, and she said her mother would not set foot in any church belonging to the devil, and certainly not the Catholic Church, which was one of his preferable places. And so I talked to my old pastor, and who was long since dead. He was an old Irishman as well, and he said, Well, he said, God is everywhere. Where are you having the reception? He said, normally we want to have our weddings in the Catholic Church. But he said, a girl should have her mother present at her wedding if at all possible. And so he said, make it happen. He said, do what's right for this girl, and so on. And so that was a good experience of reaching out and making things happen. And we did actually have the wedding. And I was in Reading about 2 years ago, minding my own business, coming out of the Red Lion Hotel, and this guy comes in and he said, I was dressed casually, and he still recognized me, and he said, are you Father Kiernan? And I said, yeah. Now what? And so he said, you did my wedding. And then he told me about it. I had forgotten the circumstances, and then his wife came out and their children, and all these years later they have these children and this beautiful wedding. And I must say that I've done weddings in all sorts of settings that maybe were more prosperous looking than that one, but they didn't last and so on. And here was a good example that people of all faiths can do great things. And so the mother came, and we had a grand day, and she was comfortable so long as it wasn't in a particular church. So then it went from there, and then then later on we had what is still a prospering thing up in that area called the Anderson Cottonwood Christian Assistance, and it's Anderson and Cottonwood are south of Reading, right. Small towns. But I was the pastor there in Anderson, and we had the most wonderful experience with so many churches, and in fact there was all the different faiths were involved there, and so it was centered around helping the poor and the needy, and we had a location that we were able to purchase, and everybody came, and different faiths came and worked. I think it was every Tuesday and Friday we gave out food. It was just an enormous experience. And then, of course, because of the relationships, the faith aspect became more, and the respect and the understanding, and then we would have various events. So that continued, and then I came to Sacramento, of course, itself, and then the Interfaith Service Bureau, as we knew it, now has moved on to what we're doing today, which I think actually I've seen it prosper over the years, even though I know challenges are great and finances are tight, and so but I'm sure everybody will financially help you, John, in the great work you're doing in the greater Interfaith. So it's an important part of my life today, and I know Bishop Soto and Bishop Wiegand have been great supporters in allowing the cathedral to be made available for various occasions, and it's a joy to know the many faiths.
After we did that interfaith night of music and the spoken word in September, I think I had at least 25 emails and or phone calls that said what a wonderful evening that was, but that was spectacular that we were in the cathedral. Mm-hmm. That just meant, and I don't think anybody contacted me were Catholic. Mm-hmm. They were all the other faiths, and they thought that was just a wonderful, wonderful time, and it just seemed natural to us, but to them it didn't necessarily, and we won over a lot of hearts.
Well, one of the great things about the cathedral is that it's open from 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening, and of course the poor congregate there for cooling in the summer and heating in the winter, and all sorts of people come in, even the governor himself, you see him come in there once in a while, and various other, so we have very high officials and poor people, as I say. But people can go in there, and if anybody is listening to our show today, if you're walking past there, walk in, sit down, meditate, look up at the art and so on, and just feel at home, and whatever your faith persuasion is, then have some experience, just even if it's only getting away from the rat race for 2 minutes and sitting down and resting your weary legs.
The restoration of the cathedral is just borderline spectacular, I think. It's a beautiful, beautiful house of worship.
Well, I know certainly every time I go in there, I think of Bishop Wiegand and the effort that was made there, and people are grateful, and the cathedral in many ways belongs to the city, not just to Catholics, but to all people of interest.
Now you have an administrative or management role with the cathedral, do you not?
Yeah, I'm the rector of the cathedral, so I'm supposed to know what's going on, and sometimes I do. And so my responsibility is to oversee things in the name of the bishop. Technically, the bishop is the pastor of the cathedral, and it's his church. All the churches, of course, are his church in a way, but in a special way, the cathedral belongs to the bishop, and so his chair is there, and so it's from there that we have what we call the ex cathedra teaching, the teaching from the chair, where the bishop is seen as the symbol of unity and proper teaching in the diocese. But I take his place in the normal run-of-the-mill things, and then on the great occasions like Christmas and Easter and other important events, he would be the one celebrating the Mass. But the regular Sundays, if he's not available, myself and other priests would celebrate the Mass.
Do you still enjoy presiding over Mass?
Yeah, Masses is a wonderful experience because
It is.
And it's different every time, and the congregation, not to mention the music, not to mention the readings or the different ones. And even on Sunday when the readings are the same, whether you do 2 Masses or 5 Masses, but they still a great event and different people. And what delights me is when I see the people walking into the cathedral, and whether I'm on the Mass or not on the Mass, I try to greet them as they come. And there's old people having a hard time making it up the steps, and there's young people bouncing up the steps. And then I think of all the people coming from the variety of circumstances in their lives. So the cathedral is beautiful, but of course the church is truly the people, not the buildings.
Of course.
And so it's God's holy people coming together as family of God. So every Mass for me, we're only allowed to say 3 Masses on a given day and 4 in an emergency. But if I could say 5 or 6, I would, depending on the situation, because it's easy, and the joy of praising God and being with God in a special way, always with God, but in the Mass in a special way.
Is the Sacramento Diocese doing reasonably well?
Yeah, it's doing pretty good, like everybody else, of course, with the economic challenges we face. We've had cutbacks in some ways, though thank God the cathedral people have been very generous. And obviously the church has many issues to deal with, and the whole clergy situation has been difficult for us, and these embarrassments keep coming up. But human nature being what it is, I'm sure that the percentages, there'll always be sin and failing, but we are now determined to make sure that this is dealt with as completely and totally, and quickly, I might add, as possible. So there are challenges, but Bishop Soto is a strong leader and a gentleman, but also very firm on doing things as best he can to please Christ.
Well, and it seems to me the Catholic Church is the long pole in the tent of religions in Greater Sacramento. There's, I have many Catholic friends. I work with Catholic people. They're thrilled and pleased and honored to be Catholic.
Yeah, and it's, as James Joyce said, Catholic, here comes everyone. And funnily, there's a sort of a strange connection between Catholics, that they have this feeling that while they're truly the church and they believe that they're based upon Jesus and on Peter and the great tradition and the unbreakable tradition, but they still have this great respect for other faiths. And in fact, we appreciate very much people of any other faiths, and as even people of no faith, because as St. Augustine said, there are many in the church who are not of Christ, and there are many not in the church who are of Christ. So there's always that openness, and I would hope also a humility that, and we have been helped to grow in humility recently with various things that have happened, but a strong belief in the beauty of our own faith. But I believe that doesn't oppose dialogue, that I can strongly believe what I believe, but I can still have great respect for the faith of someone else and rejoice actually in his or her belief as well, while maintaining my own position. And in fact, that's a big point, I think, of Pope Benedict's, and it's something that I try to put into practice, that I can respect what other faiths are, but they should be well able to freely say what they believe and act on it. I should, and then God will take it from there. And if you're meant to be this or that or the other, then in God's own time, God will sort it all out.
Work that out. That's very well said. Have you been in the Sistine Chapel?
I have. What an experience.
My wife and I were there a couple of years ago, and it was filled. You know, there were a lot of people. And a priest would come up to the side door every now and again and just go, shh. And everybody would get real quiet for about 10 seconds. Then everybody's, well, look at this and look at that. 2 or 3 minutes go by, he'd open there, shh. Everybody would quiet down. That was a...
Nice work if you can get it.
Yeah. That was a fun experience. I mean, by fun, I mean, that was enriching, and you could see that everybody was being affected in a different way by something different. Of course, everybody appreciated the finger of God, but that represented a lot to a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and that was a really fun experience. I mean, we came out of there and said, wow, that was delightful. That was really delightful.
Well, one hopes that happens, and whenever one goes, Bishop Wiegand and I had the blessed opportunity to be in Jerusalem earlier this year, and to be at the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, the various places that one goes, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I mean, to be in places that are holy and esteemed by people and that have a long tradition, and that thousands of people have come through. In fact, the whole goal of faith should be to enrich our lives and to give us some sort of, all these experiences should give us some insight into the divine, something to lift us beyond the mundane, which is easy to get caught up in our rat race society. So when you go into the Sistine Chapel or many other places, the great cathedrals of Europe or many other great facilities around the world of various faiths, the hope is that one is uplifted, enriched, and given a vision of something greater than just the normal.
Going back to your boyhood or your adolescence even, was there a priest who you just sort of said, one of these days I'd like to grow up and be the kind of man he is?
Well, there was a Father McGee, actually. I'm not sure I would go that far, but he was a delightful man, and actually he, probably more than anybody else, gave me the confidence to speak and to be comfortable either in an environment like this or with people or preaching. He just was a very kind and encouraging man. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack, but a month after I left Ireland. So but he had been a great influence in my life, and a great historian and great geographer. And as he talked about the different places in geography classes around the world, he spoke about them with great love and appreciation for all the peoples. I always remember him talking about Valparaiso. One always had this, when you're young, you have these visions, and maybe that was part of what brought me to Sacramento, that he and these classes had shown me the greatness of people in other places and have a vision of seeing far away.
In America, most non-Catholics would say, have you ever been to Notre Dame, the campus and the college?
I have sinned. I have not been
You
to
have
Notre
not
Dame.
I've always, everybody always says, oh, Notre Dame. And, it represents the Catholic Church really well.
In great ways it does. I've been to some of the great cathedrals, and most of the great cathedrals in the country, east and west and in the south, but haven't got to Notre Dame. I almost was there a couple of times, and God willing, I will repent of my sin and we'll take care of this matter.
Now let's go back to Ireland for a second. Did you ever play golf as a boy?
No, I never played golf.
Never
I played
golf.
soccer. I played a little bit of rugby. I played Irish football, played handball, and tried a little bit at the Irish game of hurling, but mostly Irish football and soccer were my boyhood interests.
One night.
Basketball, yeah.
One night 10 years ago, so my wife and I were in a pub in Wales, and a group of soccer players just came rushing in. And they were dirty and everything, and they were thrilled because they had beat the Irish that day. Some team from somewhere. And I said to the waiter, why is this such a big deal? And she said, well, they haven't beat the Irish in about 30 years.
Yes.
So they had won their soccer game, and they were really, really pleased, and we got a pretty good laugh out of that.
Wonderful what people experience with sports and with music and so on. I often think of that without those things, we'd probably all go insane. And the excitement that people get about their little local team, it could be maybe a small community, but you think they had won the World Series.
Exactly.
And the community gathers around them, and maybe it's just the juvenile team or the minor team, and they're no big deal in the eyes of the world, but for them, this is a glorious time, and it's great that people have those experiences.
Do you have hobbies?
Well, as I say, for better or worse, my work is extremely satisfying to me. I do like to walk, and to get an opportunity to go to the ocean or even out to Folsom Lake. Sometimes to get up into the mountains. I spend a lot of time actually in the high Sierras as a pastor, and so sometimes just for to walk out among the pine trees. Those are things. I do like to read, though a lot of my reading today is just work in a sense, and opportunity to be with a few people that I can just really relax with. And one of the great things is the fellowship that there is among priests as brothers, and it's much more than a job, and it's more of a group of fellowship. And so just having, like this evening, we'll have 4 or 5 of us have dinner, and very satisfying and relaxed, and we don't always talk business, and we have some good humor, and so that's one of my pleasures, is visiting with either the priests who live in the place where I am, or other situations where I have joyful visits with brothers.
Speaking of reading, did you, if you can read, you can overcome about anything. Mm-hmm. Did you like to read as a boy?
Yeah, I did, and I grew up on many things like Shakespeare and Robert Louis Stevenson and poetry, and I like to read history and, as I said earlier, geography. So many things like that. Yeah, I obviously want to keep abreast of things and try to read modern theological books and so on.
Well, we're about out of time. It flies by way too fast.
Oh,
Thank you very, very much for coming. If you could wave a magic wand in the world, what would appear or go away? Or
Well, I was delighted yesterday with the gathering in Assisi, Italy, where the Pope met with so many different faiths. And so I think if people could have an appreciation and respect for each other, and some simplicity and humility, and appreciation that we're all God's children, and that God is calling us to holy lives, and that not so much the things we have make us important, but our relationship with God and our brothers and sisters in the human family. So to develop that and to see that grow, that's what gives me real joy.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Wonderful to be here, John. Thanks very much.